Now, I'm going to shift gears now, and we're going to do a little mini LP engagement case study. The reason I want to do this is to set the premise that having an engaged investor network matters. One lever for creating that engagement is actually proper one-to-one onboarding with your investors when they join your syndicate. Take the time to do that, because even though it is an investment of time and effort, it unlocks scale later on when you're getting deals done. So we're going to do a comparison here between how I operate this philosophy of onboarding to keep making sure the investor base is engaged versus a large scale network that hasn't done this. And we'll look at the numbers. The comparison point is with another large scale syndicate, somebody that I know personally. They are pretty well established in the venture space. Because of this person, who I'm going to call Abel, they built a 1,600 investor mailing list in 1 year, just simply by saying, hey, I'm starting a syndicate. You all know me. I'm trusted in the community. They had this crazy rapid growth, and they didn't engage with investors. They were relying on the scale of the network, the number of people, in order to get deals done. So the first touch point with investors is when you push out the deal. And this is always a bit risky because you don't have any operating history. You don't know where you're going to land. This person, Abel, their team, he had a partner. So you have two partners working on this. And because of the scale, they hired one full-time employee to do operations. They didn't have the right know-how. They didn't have the right infrastructure in place. They didn't have the right technology operations, which is something that I emphasize. And so because of this, they need to hire somebody. And they were paying $6,000 a month out of pocket for this person to help them with operations. Now, re-emphasizing this point that investor engagement is always the bottleneck in syndicate performance once you get to operating scale. It applies to everyone, including ourselves. When you're starting out, the instinct is, I need to build my investor network. And I understand that. Obviously, you need the numbers. But once you have enough to get your first deal done, you'll quickly see that your bottleneck shifts to engaging investors. In this case, since Abel was able to grow his audience so large so quickly, a lot of his investors were cold leads. So their likelihood to invest, their average check size, were completely unknown variables. There is a gap between their goals and performance. I know this because Abel reached out to me and say, hey, could we have a chat? Could you help me out and figure out this problem? They said that their ambition was to write a $500,000 check consistently. So we can infer from this that they are meaningfully far away from this goal. So we're going to do a side-by-side comparison on the funnel management between our metrics and theirs. And we're going to rely on some of the benchmarks that I shared earlier. So let's say that in our network, we have 1,000 investors top of funnel. And at 1,000 plus scale, let's say we have an engagement rate of 15% on any deal. Out of this, we have 25% commitment rate. And these numbers are a bit lower than the benchmarks I established earlier, which were on the 100 to 200 investor scale to basically compensate for that scaling effect. My average check is about $15,000 today. It can fluctuate up to $20,000, but let's just use $15,000. Based on this, the math says that we should be consistently hitting $560,000 checks on the average deal, assuming these metrics hold. And for Abel on the right, we know that he's not at $500,000. So I'm going to pick a number and say that, hey, maybe he's hitting $250K only. We know that his top of funnel is 1,600 investors. And I'm going to assume that his average check is the same as ours, 15,000, which means that the engagement rate and the commitment rate are unknown variables. We have no visibility on that. And I don't think that they actually measure it. So we wouldn't know even if we asked, and they could share that number with us. Basically, if you look at this, it means that on the Angel School side, our engagement times commitment rate is 3.75%. And to make the math work out for Abel Syndicate, their engagement times commitment rate is 1.04%, which means that there's a delta of 3.6x between a warm engaged investor network and a cold network. So this is a massive difference, which is why I make the argument it's worthwhile to spend the time with one-to-one onboarding. Of course, if you're in a situation like Abel is, where you have just you're completely overwhelmed by the numbers, then you need to find some way to prioritize, but you should still invest the time to do the one-to-one onboarding to basically move the needle. Okay, so this is the case study, and we're driving at the point here of like why warming up your network, keeping them engaged, building the relationship, and it unlocks trust. And unlocking trust basically means it unlocks capital when you're actually doing a deal. This is the point of this.